Welcome to In-Silico Trials Real Impact, the In-Silico UK podcast that's revolutionizing the way we think about medical innovation. I'm Professor Alejandro Frangi from the University of Manchester, and I'll be your guide through this fascinating world of in-silico technologies. In each episode, we'll dive into cutting-edge research and groundbreaking news that are shaping the future of medical product development and regulation. From computational modeling to simulated clinical trials, we are exploring how digital approaches are transforming healthcare, making it safer, more efficient, more equitable, and incredibly precise. So, whether you're a researcher, regulator, a member of the public, or a patient representative, or simply curious about the future of medicine, tune in as we unravel the complex world of in-silico methods and their real-world impact. Get ready to discover how computer-simulated trials are leading to very real breakthroughs in patient care. In-Silico Trials Real Impact, where algorithms and data are saving lives. Let's begin.
Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today we're diving into a research article that really caught my eye. It's all about handling bias in healthcare data, particularly when AI comes into play.
Oh yeah, that's a big one these days.
It is a big one. And the article we're looking at is called Identifying and Handling Data Bias Within Primary Healthcare Data Using Synthetic Data Generators.
Okay.
And it was published in the journal Heliyon. You ready to jump in?
Absolutely. Always up for a good deep dive.
So this research zeroes in on the UK's National Health Service, the NHS.
Right.
Now they have these massive healthcare databases.
Yeah.
And you'd think those would be pretty reliable, right? I mean, we're talking tons of data.
Yeah, you would think so, but even huge data sets like that can have hidden biases lurking within them.
Oh, really?
It really is like building a house on a foundation with cracks. You know, no matter how impressive the structure is, it's still going to be unstable.
And in healthcare, those cracks can have some very real consequences. The study points out that even just the standard procedures for collecting data can actually introduce bias.
Yeah.
So what does that look like in practice?
Well, imagine a situation where, cultural sensitivities within a community lead to some types of health information consistently being underreported.
Okay, yeah.
Or maybe certain groups just have less access to healthcare in the first place, so their data is less likely to be captured at all.
Right, so you're saying there are going to be gaps.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And those gaps and inconsistencies, they can really skew the data and make it less representative of the entire population.
So then if you use that data to train an AI model to, say, predict someone's risk of having a stroke, what happens?
Where you're likely to end up with a model that's less accurate for certain groups.
Makes sense.
It might overestimate the risk for some and underestimate it for others.
Right.
And that can lead to, misdiagnoses, delays in treatment, or even the wrong treatment altogether.
That is a pretty sobering thought.
Yeah.
The article also talks about synthetic data. Is that part of the solution here?
Synthetic data is definitely a tool in the toolbox.
Okay.
It's essentially artificial data, but it's designed to mimic the patterns of real data, but without containing any actual patient information.
Ah, interesting.
So it's a way to develop and test AI models while protecting privacy.
So you're creating a stand-in data set.
Right.
But if the original data is biased, wouldn't the synthetic data just inherit those same biases?
That's exactly the challenge. And that's where the researchers come in with the new technique they call Bayes boost.
Ooh, okay, now this is where things get really interesting.
Right.
So what is Bayes boost and how does it actually work?
So Bayes boost is a two-step process. First step is called uncertainty analysis.
Okay.
Think of it this way. The AI model is asked to make predictions. And just like us humans, it can feel more confident about some predictions than others.
So the AI is basically saying, I'm not so sure about this one.
Exactly. And those areas of uncertainty, those are often where the biases are hiding. So the researchers found a way for the AI to flag those uncertainties. Then the second step kicks in. It's called boosting. And it uses something called the Bayesian network, which is a type of probabilistic model to essentially fill in the gaps in the data. And it focuses on those areas where the AI was less certain.
So it's not just adding more data, it's targeting the areas where the AI needs more info.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And the results are quite impressive.
Okay, let's hear it.
Not only does Bayes boost help to mitigate bias, but it can actually improve the overall accuracy of the model as well.
Okay, now that is what I call a win-win.
It is.
But did they actually put this to the test with real data?
They did. They used 2 synthetic data sets in their experiments. One focused on cardiovascular disease risk factors,
Hmm?
and the other one was all about COVID-19.
Oh, wow.
Let's start with the cardiovascular data. They wanted to see if Bayes boost could handle biases related to ethnicity when predicting stroke risk.
So did it work?
It did. The original synthetic data had underrepresentation of certain ethnic groups, which, could skew the predictions.
Right.
But Bayes boost was able to identify those gaps and generate synthetic data that more accurately reflected the real-world distribution of those groups.
So it kind of leveled the playing field.
You could say that. It made sure the model was equally accurate for different ethnicities.
That's really encouraging. What about the COVID-19 data?
That data set focused on biases related to different age categories when predicting COVID-19 diagnoses.
Makes sense. Age was a huge factor in COVID outcomes.
It was.
So did Bayes boost deliver there as well?
It did. The original data set showed biases with certain age groups being underrepresented, but after applying Bayes boost, the researchers saw a significant improvement in the model's ability to predict COVID-19 diagnoses across all age groups.
Wow. So this Bayes boost technique seems pretty powerful.
Yeah, it shows a lot of promise.
Yeah, it really seems like it could change the game when it comes to AI in healthcare.
It's definitely exciting stuff.
And we've really only scratched the surface of what it could do.
Absolutely. The implications go way beyond just improving the accuracy of, diagnoses.
Oh, really? Like what?
Think about something like resource allocation during a pandemic.
Oh, yeah.
If you're relying on an AI model to help decide who gets access to limited resources, like ventilators or hospital beds,
Right.
you absolutely need that model to be free of bias.
Because a biased model could lead to, life or death decisions that disproportionately harm certain groups.
Exactly. But if we can train AI models on data that's been corrected using techniques like Bayes boost,
Yeah.
we can move towards a more equitable healthcare system for everyone.
That's a really powerful thought. Now, I'm curious, how did the researchers actually measure the success of Bayes boost in these experiments? Did they just look at overall accuracy, or were there other factors they considered?
They actually used a variety of metrics to evaluate the performance of the AI models.
Okay.
Overall accuracy is important, of course, but it doesn't tell the whole story.
Right.
So they also looked at things like sensitivity and specificity, which measure how well the model correctly identifies both positive and negative cases.
So it's not just about getting the right answer on average, it's about making sure the model is performing well across the board for all the different possibilities.
Exactly. And what they found was that Bayes boost consistently led to improvements across all those various performance metrics. It wasn't just like a little bump in accuracy. It was a more robust and reliable model overall.
Okay, so far so good. It sounds like Bayes boost is a pretty solid solution, but I imagine there are still some challenges and areas for further research.
Oh, there always are. One thing the researchers emphasize is that their work is really just the beginning. They specifically call out the need to test Bayes boost with a wider range of fairness metrics.
So making sure it holds up under different definitions of fairness.
Right. And they also point out that the data sets they used were fairly simple in terms of the types of data they contained.
What do you mean by that?
Well, they were dealing mostly with what's called categorical data, things like ethnicity, age group, or region, categories that are clearly defined.
Got it. So the challenge now is to see how Bayes boost performs with more complex types of data.
Exactly. Think about things like blood pressure readings, cholesterol levels, or genetic information.
All right.
These are continuous variables, and they can interact in very complex ways.
So the question is, can Bayes boost be adapted to handle those complexities and still effectively mitigate bias?
Precisely. That's a key area for future research, and it's going to be crucial if we want to see techniques like this become widely adopted in real-world healthcare settings.
That makes sense. It's like you wouldn't want to roll out a new navigation system that only worked on straight roads.
Right.
You need to make sure it can handle curves and intersections and all the complexities of the real world.
I like that analogy. And it highlights the importance of not just focusing on, developing new algorithms, but also making sure that they're robust and adaptable enough to handle the messiness of real-world data.
Now, stepping back for a moment, it's important to remember that we've been really deep in the weeds of this particular research article.
We have.
But the issues it raises are part of a much bigger picture, right?
Absolutely. Bias in healthcare data is a reflection of deeper societal biases. We're talking about systemic inequalities that have existed for generations.
So it's not just about fixing the data, it's about addressing the root causes of those inequalities in the first place.
Exactly. Technology can be a powerful tool for change, but it can also perpetuate existing biases if we're not careful.
Which brings us back to the importance of responsible AI development.
For sure.
We need diverse teams of researchers and developers who can bring a range of perspectives and lived experiences to the table.
I couldn't agree more. Diversity isn't just a feel-good buzzword. It's absolutely essential for creating technology that is truly equitable and beneficial for everyone.
Well said. Now, before we move on to our final thoughts for this deep dive, I want to circle back to the research and ask one more question. Did the researchers compare Bayes boost to any other existing techniques for dealing with bias in data?
They did. They looked at a couple of commonly used techniques called Samity and Edison. These methods are often used to address something called class imbalance in data sets.
Okay, remind me what that means again.
Class imbalance is when you have a data set where one category or class is much more prevalent than another.
Got it. So like in a data set of COVID-19 patients, you might have way more people who tested negative than positive.
Exactly. And that imbalance can skew the results of an AI model.
Right.
So Sepnate and Edison try to address this by rebalancing the data, making sure that both classes are equally represented.
So they're trying to level the playing field, so to speak.
Yeah.
But how did they compare to Bayes boost in terms of mitigating bias?
The researchers found that while Samot and Edison can be effective at improving overall model performance, they weren't as effective as Bayes boost at specifically targeting biases related to protected attributes like ethnicity or age.
So Samot and Edison might be able to create a more balanced data set overall, but they might miss the nuances of bias that affect particular groups.
That's a good way to put it. Bayes boost, on the other hand, goes beyond just overall balance. It aims to ensure that the model is fair and accurate for all groups.
That's a key distinction. It's not just about balance, it's about equity.
Precisely. Now, there was another technique they compared Bayes boost to called fair smote.
Okay.
This one is a bit more sophisticated because it tries to address both class imbalance and bias related to sensitive attributes.
So it's trying to tackle two problems at once.
Exactly. But the researchers found that fair smote had some limitations. One issue is that it requires dividing the data into privileged and unprivileged groups based on the sensitive attribute.
I can see how that could be problematic. I mean, the real world is much more nuanced than that.
It is.
Trying to force people into those binary categories could actually end up reinforcing stereotypes.
That's a valid point. And it highlights the need for techniques that can account for the complexities of intersectionality,
Right.
where different forms of privilege and disadvantage overlap and intersect.
Because someone might belong to a group that's considered privileged in one context but unprivileged in another, it's not a simple either situation.
Exactly. And on top of that, the researchers found that while fair smote sometimes improved fairness metrics, it sometimes came at the cost of overall accuracy.
So it's like trying to solve one problem but creating another one in the process.
You could say that. Bayes boost, on the other hand, consistently demonstrated improvements in both fairness and accuracy.
So it sounds like, at least based on this research, Bayes boost is a more promising approach. But did the researchers uncover any other interesting findings?
Yes, they found that the effectiveness of Bayes boost could actually vary depending on the specific type of bias being addressed and the target variable being predicted.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all solution.
Right. Its performance can depend on the context. For example, they found that it was particularly effective at mitigating bias related to ethnicity when predicting stroke risk. But in another experiment, it was less effective at mitigating bias related to region when predicting COVID-19 diagnosis.
Interesting. So it seems like there's still work to be done to figure out exactly when and how Bayes boost works best.
Absolutely. And this highlights the need for careful consideration and testing when applying these types of techniques to different healthcare data sets. It's not as simple as just plugging in an algorithm and expecting it to solve all the problems.
Right. It requires a deeper understanding of the data itself and the specific biases that might be present.
Exactly. It's a reminder that we need to approach AI in healthcare with both enthusiasm and caution. The potential is enormous, but we have to be mindful of the ethical implications.
Well said. Now, I think that's a good place to pause for a moment. When we come back, we'll wrap up our deep dive with some final thoughts on what this all means for the future of AI in healthcare. And we're back. So we've been talking all about fairness and accuracy in AI for healthcare, and now it's time to kind of wrap things up with some final takeaways from this deep dive.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting discussion.
It has. I think for me, one of the most fascinating things we talked about was this idea of uncertainty analysis. It's almost like giving the AI a way to say, hey, I'm not so sure about this.
It's like the AI is raising its hand and saying, I need a little help here.
Mm-hmm.
And the researchers actually found that by fine-tuning how they measured uncertainty, they could make Bayes boost even more effective.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's almost like they gave the AI a better sense of its own limitations, which can really help us humans make better decisions.
It's like acknowledging that even the most advanced AI isn't perfect, right? There are always going to be areas where it needs more information or maybe a different perspective.
Exactly, and that highlights just how important an ongoing research and development is in this field.
Yeah.
We need to keep pushing those boundaries, but also always keep in mind the potential pitfalls.
It's all about balance, right?
Yeah.
Embracing the power of AI to make healthcare better, but also making sure it's being used responsibly and ethically.
Absolutely. And this research that we've been talking about, with its focus on both the technical stuff and the societal implications, is a great example of how we can move towards that goal.
So where do we go from here? What's the next step for researchers who are working on this bias mitigation in healthcare AI?
Well, one area that's really ripe for exploration is how to apply techniques like Bayes boost to even more complex data sets.
Yeah.
We talked about how they focused on categorical data in this study, but a lot of healthcare data sets also include these continuous variables, things like blood pressure readings or genetic information.
Right. And that's a whole other level of complexity when you start factoring in all those different variables and how they might interact with each other.
Exactly. So it's going to require some creative solutions and a deep understanding of the data itself and the potential biases that might be hiding within it.
And it's going to require continuing to work together, right?
Mhm.
Researchers, clinicians, and ethicists all need to be at the table to make sure these technologies are developed and used in a way that benefits all patients.
Couldn't agree more. It's a team effort, and the stakes are high. We're talking about potentially transforming healthcare and improving lives, but we have to do it right. We have to make sure it's equitable and just for everyone.
Well said. And for our listeners who want to dive even deeper into all of this, we'll be sure to include a link to the full research article in the show notes.
Definitely worth a read.
And we encourage you to stay curious, stay informed, and keep asking those tough questions about AI and how it's being used in our lives. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a fascinating topic, but until then, thanks for listening.